So I've got a theory about Gareth Evans. I've got a theory. You've seen Star Wars, The Force Awakens, right?
Yes.
So something we need to mention, most of you guys probably know this, Conjure Club are the guys from the Raid. And I have a theory that J.J. Abrams said, get me the guys from the Raid films. I love the Raid. Gareth Evans is an awesome director. I think you should get him for Rogue One. And then they hired Gareth Edwards because they were confused. That's my theory.
It could have happened. It'll come out 10 years from now. It was just a miscommunication over one phone call. And,
It's a really easy mistake to make. Evans, Edwards. Yeah, I know. Hello and welcome to Pieces of Work. I'm Corey, and this is episode 7 of the podcast. Erik from Asian Movie Enthusiast is back with me. How are you, mate?
Very good.
What have you been doing in the last few months since we spoke?
Well, I've been watching more Asian movies and trying to get up some videos on my channel, and been doing a lot of family related stuff, with all the holidays. So it's been pretty busy.
So I've noticed with your videos recently, you're going through your collection of DVDs.
Yes.
How many do you own all up? Do you know? An exact number?
Probably, it's got to be somewhere around 600 maybe.
Wow.
Something like that.
That's way more than me, man. Way more.
I've accumulated over 10 years too, so...
See, I did that thing when I was younger. I bought a lot of DVDs, and I had probably close to 1,000. And then before I moved overseas, I sold everything because I'm like, well, I can't take all this stuff with me, and then I had nowhere to store it. So when I came back to Australia, I had to be very selective in what I bought. There were some things I bought again, and then there was a lot of stuff I think I just bought because. I mean, yeah. Have you got stuff that you haven't even watched? Or have you watched everything?
I've seen almost everything. I have a few recent purchases that I have not yet watched. But my thing is that I get paranoid because there's times where I'll want to watch something that I saw 7, 8 years ago and the DVD's out of print. It's not available on Netflix, and it's kind of hard to track down. So over the past few years, I've been going through my ratings or whatever and trying to pick out the ones that I know that I'll want to rewatch again, and I've been gobbling those up as they're still around.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that specifically with, in Australia and America, we are kind of lucky because we do get some Asian movies released on DVD, but there's ones, I've got some Korean Blu-rays on the shelf, and I've looked on eBay. They're out of print. I could sell them for almost $400 a pop. Because that's, especially with Korean stuff, they only produce a really small amount. So once they're gone, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy. You're right. You do have to kind of get stuff when you see it. Now, I'd like to buy more stuff. It's just, it's so expensive here.
Yeah.
We don't have things like Black Friday where we can get stuff really cheap.
Mm.
We have sales on Boxing Day, but it's never anything amazing. It's usually just 10% off or 20% off, and some Blu-rays in Australia can cost between $40 and $50.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like Japan.
Oh, Japan's crazy. Absolutely crazy. But when I went to Japan a few years ago, I was excited because there were all these Japanese movies that you couldn't get anywhere else other than Japan. But you go into a shop, and if the shops, you're lucky enough to find the movie you want in the store, it might cost you, Australian money, almost $100. And 99% of the time, Japanese films don't have English subtitles.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's a real shame. Anyway, today's topic, we're going to talk about Gareth Evans. So Gareth Evans is the director of Merantau, The Raid 2. He did Safe Haven, which was the segment from VHS2. And what was the name of his first film? It was actually made in the UK. Can you remember?
I think it was called Footsteps or something like that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I don't even know if it's available.
Yeah, I've checked. I haven't been able to watch it either.
Yeah. So let's start with his first film, Merantau. When did you first see or hear of this? Did you watch this before or after the raid?
Actually, it was before the raid. Somebody on a message board, because they knew I liked, Asian movies. He said, "Hey, you should check out this movie from Indonesia called Merantau." And I said, "Really? All right, I'll check it out." And it was available on eBay with English subtitles, so I picked it up. Might have been, I don't know if it was 2009 when the movie came out, but maybe 2010. And then I immediately became a fan of the lead actor for sure after watching it.
Do you want to have a crack at pronouncing his name?
Iko Uwais is my attempt.
That's yours? Okay. Iko Uwais. I think, yeah. Okay, we're going with that. That's the problem. I'm going to warn you guys. Erik and I, we kind of not Indonesian, so we don't exactly know how to pronounce these names perfectly. So if we make a mistake, we apologize. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think we could call him Iko. I mean, we hang out with him at the bar sometimes. We're buddies, so we'll just call him Iko.
Iko. All right. Now, I watched this film after the raid. So for me, Gareth Evans, well, my introduction to him was the raid. And I was blown away by the raid. And then I had to seek out everything that he'd done. And the only thing available in Australia was this. And this DVD was actually really cheap. I paid about $9 for it. And I've watched the film probably 3 times. And I think it's fantastic.
I agree.
Yeah. So do you want to give a quick synopsis of Merantau?
Sure. So we have Iko in the lead role here, and he's, the film starts out where he's on his, I think, rural farm with his family and his mother, and he's about to go on his Merantau, which I guess from what little I know, it's almost like a coming-of-age journey, so to speak, where you leave the house for the first time and travel and gain experience in life. So he travels out into a nearby city. I'm not sure if it's Jakarta or not. And
I think it's Jakarta.
Is it? And then he tries to basically establish a martial arts shop to teach kids martial arts, but he's having some problems, establishing contacts and getting set up. And along the way, he meets a young girl and her little brother who are having trouble with a local human trafficking group, and things go from there.
Iko first confronts these guys. He actually gets his ass handed to him.
Yeah.
And then it's really a vengeance / it's a story we've seen done many times, like the guy trying to protect the young girl, getting her out of the sex trade and whatnot. And the thing is, Gareth Evans, a lot of people will complain that he's not the best writer. And look, the kind of movies he's making, they're not meant to be Citizen Kane, but I will argue that The Raid 2 is a fantastically written film, but we'll get to that later. What did you like the most when you first saw this film? What was it exactly that kind of blew you away, Erik?
I think it was that it, even more so than the first Raid film, I think it blends in more of a traditional drama into everything as well. I think that for some reason the end of the movie kind of it worked, I think, on a dramatic level, and I think they spent a lot of time during the first 40 or so minutes kind of setting things up with the characters, and then when the action hits, it's not only impressive on a technical level, but it has a dramatic impact to it too.
Yeah, the thing that blew me away was the fight scenes, and it just seems so real. Did you get that feeling as well? Oh my god, these guys might be stuntmen, but I got the feeling that a lot of those punches were the real thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially in like the final fight. A lot of times our hero gets kicked in the back, which you don't really see a whole lot in martial
Mm.
arts movies. Usually people like wait until he takes one guy down. So I kind of like the scrappiness of it too. I think it gave it a little bit of like a grittiness and
Mm.
grounded nature that sometimes you don't always see with martial arts films.
With this being Evans's first film in Indonesia, you can kind of see the beginning. Like he does take a few risks, especially with the camera work in this film. But as his career progresses, you can see that he gets much more daring. I think the big scene in this film for me was the bar scene when he goes into the bar and he starts taking on all the people. Now I get the feeling that that was kind of the blueprint for the bar scene that comes in the Raid 2 later on down the track. What do you
Hmm.
think?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Um, I think in that particular scene, it's like the first time we actually get to see our protagonist like kick some rear end, and the I would say that like the it's similar in the one in the raid too, because you have like a one versus many scene.
Mm.
The outcome is of course a bit different,
Oh, very different. Yeah.
but yeah, I do agree that there's some similarities there. And since it was probably the first fairly large fight scene that Evans ever actually made. It was quite
Mm.
impressive.
Yeah, very impressive. It's very impressive for a guy that, from what I understand, he's Welsh. He was an online Welsh teacher, so he actually taught people the Welsh language online. And he has a background, I think an academic background in film, so he studied film and got offered to go film some documentary footage in Indonesia to film the Salat, the Indonesian version of that. Is it originally an Indonesian martial art, or is their version just a different version?
That's a good question. I'm not sure where the ultimate origination of it is from, but it's been there for quite a while.
Right. So he went over there, filmed some documentary footage, and that's how he met Eco. And then I think he also his wife's Indonesian as well, Gareth Evans's wife, and she's been the producer on all of his films. And I think it's just that's it. That's the end of the story. He moved there, met this amazing martial artist, and decided, hey, let's make movies. And I guess they get away with a lot, especially in Merantau. But also, you see it a lot in the other two films. The risks that they take. Like, he doesn't do the Hollywood thing where everything's shot really close up. You can't really make out what's going on. There's no shaky cam. It's like everything is in shot. Even with the continuity, it's like on a film with such a small budget, like the continuity, I couldn't fault it. Like especially in the fight scenes, like you got to think there's a lot of work to be done when you're filming and choreographing a fight scene. Like if somebody's blemish is even remotely out of place, or the furniture if you have to reshoot something. So I get the feeling they did a lot of this just in one hit.
Yeah, I think like anybody out there who's watching right now, definitely there's a lot of interviews with this director on YouTube
Mm.
or a number of different websites, and I love listening to them because he's so interesting to listen to. And one of the things he mentions is that they do spend a lot of, I guess, pre-production time in
Mm.
like an office with crash mats. And he'll go up and he'll say, okay, with Iko and then Yaya, and the guy who plays Mad Dog, they're the two choreographers. And
Mm.
he says, okay, this is the scene, this is how it's got to play out. Then they choreograph the scene, and he gives his insight while they're choreographing it. And then after that, he gets out like a camcorder, and they
Right.
actually go through like a walkthrough of every single shot that he needs for that fight scene. Then he puts it into like a visual storyboard on his computer, so when he's out actually shooting the film, he knows every single shot that he needs to get before they leave, production.
Right. So everything is planned down to like the smallest detail.
Yeah.
So the guy seems like a bit of a perfectionist.
Yeah, I think he's very paranoid that he's going to screw something up, is the
Right.
impression I get.
Well, look at his filmography. I don't think he's
Yeah.
screwed anything up yet.
No.
Is there anything you want to add about this film?
Um, I would say that there's one moment that I won't spoil. It kind of surprised me that they went there near the end regarding the girl,
Ah,
and
yeah.
I think that it was again, it added a little bit more of a dramatic weight that I wasn't really expecting. But the 2-on-1 final fight I think is really good. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. All right, well, let's move on to the big one, the movie that pretty much everyone has seen, and the movie that kind of broke Evans. Well, not didn't break him, a breakout film, The Raid. Now, I saw this film after seeing Dread. Do you remember the big controversy with Dread?
Yeah.
So a lot of people claimed that, I think they said that The Raid was a rip-off of Dread, or the other way around, or I read somewhere that Dread was actually in production before The Raid. What do you think of this, Erik? Do you think there's any connection whatsoever, or it's just a coincidence?
I think it's probably a coincidence. I yeah, I know. I heard a lot of that debate early on, and I was thinking, I went one way and went the other, and then in the end, I just thought, it's probably just a coincidence. There's an action film that takes place mostly in a building, and two of them were made the same year.
Well, if you look at it, if you take it, really strip it back. I was talking to a friend about this, and we kind of had a theory. It's a very basic kind of, it's almost structured like a video game. But remember, like, old school video games that we used to play when we were kids? So, if you look at something like, I don't know, Double Dragon or any of those old school games, it's kind of like you start here, and then you keep going up to next bosses, and then you get to the final boss. And if you look at Dread, and you take Dread and you take The Raid, they follow a very similar formula to old school video games, where you just, all you have to do is get to the top of the building and kill the main boss. And if you look at something like Die Hard even has that same structure. It's like, John McClane starts here, and then he has to get here, and it's very this bad guy, and then you've got all the minions, and then you've got the secondary bad guy, and then finally you have, and both of those films, to me, they just seem to follow that kind of format, which isn't anything new. I think you're right, it's just a coincidence that they both came out in the same year. Like, because when you look at, if you played both films side by side, they're completely different. Like, the action scenes, especially Dread's all guns are blazing, where The Raid is hand-to-hand combat most of the time.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, for those who haven't seen The Raid, would you mind giving us a synopsis, please?
Sure. I could probably sum it up in about 5 or 6 words, this movie. You basically have a group of police officers who go into, like, this I forgot how many stories there are. It's like 13 stories or something like that, and they got to go in and get this drug cartel leader who's on the top floor of this building. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to do it quietly. So they go in floor by floor, and they try to secure each floor, because this thing, it's early in the morning or something, and unfortunately somebody trips an alarm and all hell breaks loose.
Yeah. Like I said, Dread and The Raid, very similar, but I do prefer The Raid over Dread. I still like Dread, but The Raid, again, it just seems so much, it seems so real. Everything you watch, everything that you see happen on screen, it's like, it's happening for real. Where Dread, you can kind of work out, yeah, right, they obviously put CG in there, and especially with the 3D stuff. With The Raid and with Gareth Evans's filmmaking style, it's very old school. It's refreshing. Even though they used to make movies like this 20, 30, 40 years ago, especially Hollywood doesn't make films like this anymore. Like, it's very rare that we get movies like this, and I think that's why it was so successful, because people were happy to, after all these years of watching Michael Bay movies and Jason Bourne movies where the camera's just doing this constantly, it was refreshing to see a real action movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. He always talks about his action design in his interviews. He has like a specific thing, a specific kind of action in his mind when he goes into making these. And I think at one point he said that he likes to shoot his action in the present, so to speak, where he doesn't have a lot of slow motion or replays or stuff like that. Everything is very immediate and dangerous, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and that works. As somebody sitting in the audience, that definitely pays off, shooting it in that style and doing the film that way. Now, there were talks not long after The Raid came out and was an international hit that an American studio was going to remake it. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I think they said, I think it might have been somebody like Chris Hemsworth that was... I think I remember reading that he was attached at some point. And a lot of people, me included, were really against it. Was that something you were kind of like, no, don't do it?
Yeah, I was a no person. I mean, the argument that's usually made is that, well, if they do an American remake, then people will be drawn more to the original. But I don't know. I just think although it might be interesting to see them try and not do it quite as well. Every once in a while that's amusing, but yeah, I can't really see them. I mean, if you were to do like a Hemsworth, you would have to use like the Jason Bourne style of editing and like
exactly.
that type of stuff, or maybe rely more on the gunplay and like take the martial arts out of it, and that would just kind of...
And then it becomes dread.
Yeah.
Like, they've already done it, so why bother? And then you're right, you look at somebody like Chris Hemsworth, if he's to star in the film, the guy, he's a big guy, he's probably like 6'3". You look at these Indonesian guys, they're tiny. They're probably like, they're 5 foot nothing, but they're so fast and so quick, and they're skilled martial artists, and they choreograph everything. So to take that away from, but that's the movie. That's the reason why we watch these movies, for the martial arts, and to see these guys perform what is at the end of the day an art form.
Yeah, and I think there's and I know some people have a thing against martial arts movies, but when you think about it, it's a lot like a dance performance.
It is. It really is.
I mean, you have these guys who have been training probably since they were 5 years old. You have 20, 25 years of just really dedicated training to this form of fighting style, and to be able to see that captured on film is kind of special, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, that, and the fact that the director can get the performances that he does out of these guys blows my mind. Because you look at some, it's happened in the past where they go, let's take this fighter and put them in a film, and then you watch the film and you're like, oh my god, Mike Tyson comes to mind in Ip Man 3. Like, he was absolutely terrible in that film. But then, I think it says a lot about Evans as a filmmaker that he can get the performances that he does out of these guys, because their performances are completely believable. They speak well, they're good on camera, and at the end of the day, they're not, Brad Pitt. They don't have the face of Brad Pitt or Johnny Depp, so they can't rely on their good looks. They're relying on pure talent.
Yeah, I'm actually really kind of surprised that, I would expect a director maybe to have some misses early on to kind of screw some stuff up, but it's really kind of impressive how this guy just came out of the gate, and he's just expertly capturing this stuff. And I think that another thing that he does a lot, even in The Raid, which is kind of, criticized a little bit for being, plot light or character light, there are character moments that might not always come through in dialogue, or very little dialogue. He gets a lot out of it. So like Mad Dog, he shows up and he puts his gun down. He's like, shooting people's like ordering takeout. I mean, it's a brief bit of dialogue, and he doesn't say much the rest of the movie, but you kind of get an idea of what this guy's about. You know what I mean?
even the scenes with the two brothers, like that stuff, they're completely believable. Like I believe that those two guys were brothers the entire time.
Yeah, yeah. This has got better acting than a film like this really should have.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he gets away with it because he's not making these things in the UK, or he didn't go to the States to make them. And I think he gets away with a lot of stuff that he couldn't, like there's a lot of things that he does in his films that he just couldn't do in an American film or a British film.
Yeah, I mean, even in terms, I mean, I've heard even Jackie Chan say that he's been limited in when he came over to the States because of
Yeah.
various insurance-related stuff, and they wouldn't let him do something, and unless like the firefighters were around and the paramedics were around, it took like forever to get the scene done and all this kind of stuff. So I'm sure Evans has a little bit more, I guess, freedom to do what he has to do, while at the same time being, respectful of all of his actors.
Okay, so in 2013, VHS 2 came out, and there's a short segment called Safe Haven. So you've seen this, I assume?
Yes.
Have you seen all of VHS?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, so I borrowed the DVD from a friend, and I only watched Safe Haven. I didn't watch anything else. I hadn't seen Safe Haven before you and I decided to do this. I own all the other three. I have them here, and I didn't really know much about the VHS films other than these anthology movies. And from what I read, it was probably a good idea that I didn't see the first one or watch any of the other shorts in them. So Safe Haven, Erik, tell us about Safe Haven.
Yeah, it's about a news crew, and this is set in Indonesia, and they're interested in this kind of odd, almost cult of people who, have a certain belief system, and they're not really completely forward with everything that's going on in their small, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, like a convent or something like that. And so this news crew ends up convincing one of the leaders of this cult to bring the news crew in and do a like a documentary and some interviews. So they go in and they realize that some crazy stuff is going down.
Yeah, things aren't what they seem to be. So this film was directed by Evans and also one of the Was it one of the Mo brothers or both of them? I think it might have just been one of them. The guys
I think it was Timo.
Yeah, Killers. I've got the poster up here. There's a Raid 2 poster underneath it as well. I want to do a podcast actually about the Mo brothers, but I think I'm going to leave that until Headshot comes out. I'm so excited for Headshot. I just hope we get it here in Australia. But,
yeah, I think it came out in the United States like in maybe this coming weekend or the next weekend, but it's nowhere near me.
Oh, okay. I think it was like it got released. Was it the Toronto International Film Festival where it had its like premiere or something? I'm not sure. I read somewhere that was like it was doing like the festival circuit, but who knows? Hopefully, we'll get to see it in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure we will. Especially with the success of the Raid films, and Killers did quite well. I think you can buy that on DVD and Blu-ray in Australia. So for that to happen, they must think there's an audience for it. So Safe Haven, I really enjoyed it. It's probably my least favorite of Gareth Evans's stuff, but there were still things in it that I really enjoyed. There's this one sequence that I can only describe as hardcore Henry-esque.
That's a good description.
Yeah, it's kind of like... I have you seen Hardcore Henry?
I have not, but I've seen the trailers for it.
Yeah, I got bored of it really quickly. And what Evans does is he does this kind of first-person thing, and it's really effective because it's only maybe 3 or 4 minutes of the film. Like, it's a very effective sequence. And with Hardcore Henry, it's 90, 100 minutes of that, and you kind of get bored of it after a while, and it loses its effect. So, what were your kind of thoughts about Safe Haven? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I think my overall thoughts are similar to yours in that I moderately enjoyed it, and but I would still consider it to be probably the least impressive of all of Evans' films so far. I think that maybe the stuff I enjoyed the most out of it was like the visceral violence and gore that's presented,
Oh yeah,
and some of the it gets a little creative definitely during the second half of it, and I just thought that maybe like I don't want to spoil anything, but some of like the dramatic stuff and I don't know, the build-up was pretty good. There were just a few moments that felt a little contrived to me while I was watching it.
yeah. My problem was the ending gets a bit laughable. I think it's meant to be scary, but I kind of found it quite amusing. I don't want to spoil it, but that was my reaction to it. I enjoyed the first, say, yeah, two-thirds of it, and then at the end it kind of lost me a little bit. But what is the rest of VHS 2 like? Like you said, it was terrible. Come on, tell me what it's like, because I'm never going to watch it, so you can tell me.
I mean, all of VHSs kind of blend together for me. They're all a bunch of short films, documentary style. My biggest problem with all three anthologies, really with the exception of Safe Haven, which is definitely the best out of all of them, is that
Right.
they just seem kind of juvenile and obnoxious to me. The characters are usually, I mean, I know you're dealing with short films, but they're just very wafer thin, and it's almost like they're there just to annoy you, which isn't something I'm really looking for in my horror films all the time.
Right. So does it seem like pretentious, like uni students that are making these things? Because what didn't Adam Wingard direct one, and like they actually get? Well, obviously Gareth Evans did one, so
There must be they're successful at the box office, I guess, due to their budgets, their low budgets. But
yeah, but I'm really surprised that these things do well theatrically. Like I wouldn't think anthology films were profitable, but I'm guessing they do these on the cheap. Or is it a Blumhouse thing? Is it one of those companies?
I'm not sure who produced it, but I think it's a similar kind of template of
Right.
how to make money. Because even if you throw in a low marketing budget, throw some commercials out there, and you spend like 5 million or whatever, or less than 10 million on the film, and you could get a good 20, 30 million out of the U.S. box office for most horror films.
That's true. I guess it really depends on how they market these things. I haven't seen trailers for them, so I don't really know. But I could see Safe Haven working as a feature-length film if they spent a bit more time on it, fleshed it out a bit, sorted out the ending. I could actually see that working as a standalone film. What do you
Well,
think?
this film was inspired by that Jonestown massacre. You remember that?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I think Timo, when basically pitched the idea to Gareth that, hey, let's do this kind of thing, but put a twist on it. So I think, yeah, it definitely could work. But I think maybe if they kept it more like the Jonestown event, and maybe
Yeah.
like you said, tweaked the ending a little bit, it could work.
It's definitely an effective short film. Like there were moments, it's a horror. There were moments where I was actually a bit scared. I'll be honest. There were some things that creeped me out. Like a lot of the stuff I'd seen before, but for a short film, I thought it was very effective.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the big one. Dun, dun, dun. The Raid 2. So the Raid 2, I watched this again very recently, and on the Australian Blu-ray it says here, the greatest action film ever. What do you think about that comment, Eric? Do you agree, or is it very close to the greatest action film ever made?
Well, it's certainly in my top 10, if not top 5. So I would not be totally opposed to someone having that opinion. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I don't think it's the greatest action film ever, but I'm in complete agreement with you. This is definitely in my top 5. I don't know where in my top 5. It's not number 1. Number 1 for me is Die Hard. It will always be Die Hard. It's just because I grew up on that film. I watch it once a year. It's just I don't know. I guess I have it's in my heart, Die Hard. So,
it's the best Christmas film. It's the best Christmas film of all time.
I know. I watch it, and that's why I watch it every year. Every year at Christmas. In a couple of weeks, I'll be watching it again. That and Muppet Christmas Carol. They're my two. So what's the best action movie for you? Do you have one?
Man, well, actually, I think the first rate is also in the conversation. Die Hard is huge. I'm a big fan of The Matrix too.
Oh yeah.
If you count Heat as an action movie, the one with directed by Michael Mann with De Niro, that one's awesome. So yeah, there's a few. I've probably got to put one of Jackie Chan's up there, like Drunken Master 2.
Oh yeah.
So there's top 10 would be real solid. But if I really had to choose, I might have to go Die Hard just because it's just held up over time already.
It still holds up, man. Every year I watch it, I'm like, this thing hasn't. The only thing that's aged, if you watch the Blu-ray, you can really pick Bruce Willis's body double really easy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can really. There's a few scenes where you're like, oh, that's really obvious now. But back when I was a kid and I'd watch it on TV or VHS, it wasn't so obvious. But with every release, they obviously, they go back and they, give it a 4K transfer or whatever they do, and it just makes things a little bit more obvious. So the Raid 2 picks up exactly where the Raid 1 finishes, but Rama is now approached by a superior and he has to go undercover. Now the difference between the Raid and the Raid 2, I think it's huge, particularly story-wise and building this world. It's very Scorsese-ish. It opens up on this massive wide shot, and then we see his brother being killed and put in the open grave, and then it just kind of goes boom, Raid 2. And people that complain about Evans's writing not being all that great and his stories being paper thin, that argument for me doesn't work when it comes to the Raid 2. What do you think, Erik?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of complexity in this film in terms of character development, a lot of which I actually didn't get the first time I saw it. I had to watch it a few times. There's a lot of nuance to these guys, and there's, again, like I said, he's able to communicate a lot through very little dialogue in certain spots, or even mannerisms. Like, if you take, for example, like Hammer Girl and Baseball Bat Boy.
Oh, they're so cool.
And, like, they get very little screen time, but there's a scene, like, at the bar right before the, actually at the beginning, when they're first introduced, as well as right before the ending, where, Baseball Bat Boy is drinking a glass of milk at the bar. You know what I mean? That gives you kind of an insight to that he's got kind of I would say like a childish kind of persona, and he has kind of like this sibling relationship with the Hammer Girl. And near the end, when they go to fight, in the big fight, the way that it's kind of hard to describe, but the way that she forgets her hammers on the bar. She goes back and grabs him, and he's like pulling her hand. They're like little kids that are going out to play baseball or something. Yeah, so you get a little bit of a flavor with minimal type screen time.
Yeah, they're very small characters. Like the film's like just over 2.5 hours long, but they're so memorable. Like every character in this film is really well thought out, and they're all actually given something to work with, all the actors. Like, you look at Hammer Girl, and just the thing with her and Baseball Bat Boy is the sign language. Just little things like that just makes so much of a difference. Like, they could easily have been laughable characters. Even the main villain in this film, he walks with a cane. He's almost like a James Bond villain, but it's just restrained enough that they're really believable in this universe. Like, we have all this over-the-top violence, but the characters are just... I love the characters in this film.
So I like how all of the supporting characters get their chances to shine in this one. And like if you take Eka, who's the guy who our main character is, well, he's the guy who trains him and takes him in on his first job, and then he gets his chance to shine during that car chase.
Oh,
And you could just tell that yeah, he's like a supporting character, but this is a guy who I'm not spoiling anything, but there was quite a complex history behind him that I really kind of enjoyed, and I felt for the guy. You know what I mean? Even though he was just like this side character to the boss.
yeah. And that character's played by Oka Antara, who was in Safe Haven. He was like the main character in that, and he was also in Killers. And that guy's like a rapper or something in Indonesia, I read. That's his background. So, even like little characters, like the Japanese characters that are in the film, like they're just so well rounded. And I think my favorite character in this film, I'm going to have to read the actor's name, I'm sorry, is Arifin Putra.
Yeah, the gangster son.
Yeah, he is phenomenal because at the start, you kind of automatically hate him to begin with. And he's got one of those faces, like he's kind of a traditionally handsome looking man. And then he just, everything he does makes you hate him more and more and more. And then I don't want to spoil it as well, but he gets to this point where he just completely fucks up everything. And in the end, you kind of just really want him to die.
Yeah, he could have been, he could have been one of those mustache twirling guys who's just like a whiner who always complains about his daddy. But they did give him a lot of nuance. Like when he seems to be very nationalistic. He complains a lot about like foreigners taking over, certain parts of Indonesia, either culturally or whatever, and that plays into the storyline because you got this Japanese Yakuza group that's, the gangs in this movie have a very good relationship at the start too, so that kind of irks him, and you can kind of understand that.
And the thing I liked also, there's the scene where they're at the karaoke bar, and there's the girls there, and you see him starting to lose it. That's kind of the first instance where you get, oh my god, this guy is actually a bit of a sociopath. When he's trying to get the girl to sing, and it just kind of keeps escalating and escalating, and that's when Rama has to be like, cut it out, you're taking this too far. And you're right, he does come off a little bit like a spoiled brat, but I'm glad he didn't like play it that way for the entire film. Like, I'm glad this character has different levels.
Yeah, and another thing that's really kind of subtle that I heard again in an interview with the director is that the guy with the cane, right? He associates coldness with this guy. So when the gangster's son takes a phone call from him in that nightclub scene, you could see like the breath coming out of his mouth,
Right.
And then during the Prakoso dance club fight, when they get outside and it's snowing out, because that's like this guy's, this is his big impact on the film, that particular scene. So I found that kind of interesting too. There's a lot of little stuff to pick up in this movie.
Yeah, well, Yayan returns playing a different character. He's not Mad Dog in this film, even though he looks like Mad Dog, but he's playing a completely... Even that character... The amount of... They just give you like this little scene with him and his ex-wife in this cafe, and it just makes everything so much bigger and so much grander, and you're actually like, okay, this guy has a purpose. He's not just there to get from this point to this point. This character is just... Well, it's an actual character, and that's why I get a little bit annoyed when people say that Evans can't write and his stories are really thin, but not in this film. His characters are all well-rounded, and you actually care when we have that big bar fight. You're like, holy shit. Like, and there's moments in every scene. We've got the first big fight scene in the prison. That's incredible. And there's moments Like, I watched this film again the other day, and I've seen this film probably half a dozen times, and there's still parts of this film where I go, I just kind of almost, when you get to those moments where you feel like you should be covering your eyes, but you can't look away because it's just so gory and over the top.
Oh yeah, the teppanyaki grill scene is the one scene in the movie that gets me every time. Or
Oh,
whatever.
really? It's that one for you.
And,
Mine's every time somebody's like, a guy gets hit in the head, and then his head kind of goes back, and then he hits like a ledge or something. I don't know. The sound is. I think it's the sound design as well. It's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. All the fights are great. I think I heard another interview with him. He said that the big final fight in the kitchen, they spent a month and a half choreographing it, and then another month and a half getting all the camera angles in their crash mat room, and then 10 days shooting it. So that's
I'm not surprised.
It's crazy.
Yeah. One thing we haven't mentioned, he edits all of his films as well.
Yeah, that's right. And he does some of it. He does a rough edit on site with his visual
Right.
storyboard. So he can take what he's shooting and just drop it right in. And then after he lets these guys beat the crap out of each other all day, he can show them, at the end of the day, just a nice rough cut of what they did, and it gets him motivated to come back the next day.
That's amazing. Does he shoot? I'm guessing he shoots digitally.
I think so, yeah.
Like, he would have to keep kind of costs
Yeah.
down. I would assume. Now, we were talking earlier about the big kind of car scene, the car chase in this film, and there's one shot that comes to mind. There's a shot where the camera comes out of one car, and then kind of, it's clearly there's a guy. We don't see the guy, but clearly a cameraman has climbed out of a moving car's window, this big four-wheel drive, hopped onto like a motorbike or something, gone backwards, and then gone through the window of the sedan. Do you know that shot?
Yeah.
I watched that the very first time I watched The Raid 2 on... I didn't see it in the cinema, I saw it on Blu-ray the first time. I must have rewatched that shot about 10 times. I was blown away. I'd never seen anything like it.
I think there was like 3 different cameramen that were like hidden around or in the car that had to pull that off, passing it to each other through that one shot. So, and even the shot in the first raid when they dropped through the hole was pretty interesting too.
There's some great stuff like this. The ones where there's another one where they go through a window and the camera kind of like follows them, and then it's on its side, and then it kind of gets back up, and you're like, wow. Just the thought that's put into, like, you're right, like, there's a reason why these things are almost perfect, because he puts so much planning into them.
Yeah, and I think he made a few references to like the Hong Kong films, and that, these guys, Gareth is still like in his infancy in terms of doing this stuff. So, you watch some of the behind the scenes stuff from the Hong Kong martial arts films, they'll wing it sometimes. When they get on set and something doesn't work, they just wing it, and they'll spar, and it'll look really good. But he has, he can't do that right now. He's just too, he's a bit of a perfectionist, and he has trouble really, adapting a whole lot of something if something goes bad.
Well, also too, he's a foreigner. He's a guy. He's Welsh. He grew up in Wales. There isn't exactly a big, I don't think Wales has its own martial art, so he's a fish out of water maybe a little bit, so maybe he feels like he needs to be perfect. Because, maybe if he grew up in Indonesia and grew up around that stuff, maybe he wouldn't, be so particular.
Possibly.
So I've got a theory about Gareth Evans. I've got a theory. You've seen Star Wars The Force Awakens, right?
Yes.
So something we need to mention, most of you guys probably know this, Conjure Club are the guys from The Raid. And I have a theory that J.J. Abrams said, get me the guys from the Raid films. I love The Raid. Gareth Evans is an awesome director. I think you should get him for Rogue One. And then they hired Gareth Edwards because they were confused. That's my theory. I
It could
actually
have happened.
It
You know,
could
it'll come out
happen.
10 years from now. It was just a miscommunication over one phone call, and you know,
It's a really easy mistake to make.
I even
Evans,
make it sometimes.
Edwards. Yeah, I know. I've probably done it once or twice. But what amazes me is Gareth Evans hasn't even made a Hollywood film. Do you think he will?
I've heard that he would, but he's like, at least right now, he seems to be kind of a, he seems to be very honorable, or he wants to have control over his films. I don't know if he's really interested in a paycheck right now, which is kind of interesting. And he has all kinds of ideas of films he wants to do, but for some reason, people don't want to give this guy money. Like even after he did, let me see here, after he did Merantau, they wouldn't give him the money to make the Raid, or Barandal, which became the Raid 2, so he did the Raid 1 first, on a limited budget. And now, I don't know. I mean, I would think that if I was sitting on piles full of money, I'd give this guy whatever he wanted and just let him do whatever he needs to do.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's not how Hollywood works. So.
Yeah.
Look, I'm kind of glad he's sticking by his guns and he's not going to Hollywood, because you look at people like the first person that I can think of is somebody like Edgar Wright. So Edgar Wright, he makes his horror comedies in the UK, and then his first big American thing is Ant-Man, and then look what happened there. He had to leave the project. So,
or even John Woo, he made a few good ones in the States, but then after a while, it just got bad.
Yeah. I still think, I don't know, I think Broken Arrow was probably my favorite growing up of his kind of American films.
I like Face Off for some reason.
Yeah. I remember liking Face Off as a teenager, but I think it wouldn't hold up at all. But that being said, Broken Arrow is probably really shit if you watch it now too.
But it's got Howie Long. I mean, come on.
Oh, it does. I like Hard Target, though. I think Hard Target's still a good film.
Yeah.
It's got its moments. Lance Hendrickson's great in that film.
He's better than Troy Hark's collaborations with Van Damme when he did Double Team and Knockoff.
Oh, God. Let's not talk about those, shall we? Which is the one with the giant inflatable basketball? Oh, that's the one with Dennis Rodman, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, God. That's so embarrassing. So do you know what's next for Gareth Evans? Is it the Raid 3? Is that what's going to happen, or is there something completely
He's had
different?
like a untitled Gareth Evans project listed on his IMDb, but there was a Twitter or something that came through that he's doing something called The Apostle next, about a guy who an English language film, I think, about a guy who I think his daughter's kidnapped by a cult or something, and he goes to rescue her. I think that's like the basic premise of it.
So has he taken Safe Haven, and then is that like what we were saying before? Is that what he's done? He's kind of taken kind of like the concept of Safe Haven and kind of altered it? Sounds like it.
It might be more grounded, and I think he wrote the script himself this time, from what I saw. But again, with him, like, I don't know if they did attach a lead actor to it. The guy who was, I forget his name. Have you ever seen The Guest?
Oh, Dan Stevens.
Yeah, I think he's the lead actor who's going to be playing, at least that's what they've said. So, it hasn't started production yet, though, so who knows?
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't think the Raid 3 is going to come out until like 2018, 2019, maybe.
Well, that's okay. I can wait that long.
Yeah.
All right. What advice do you have for people that haven't seen any of his films yet?
Well, we actually have kind of a variety here. I mean, if you want something that's more of a traditional drama-based martial arts film, you could go with Merantau. If you want, the all-out action flick, you can just go with The Raid. And if you want like the gangster drama with awesome action, you go The Raid 2. But you should probably watch The Raid first and then move into The Raid 2. That's probably the best intro, I would say.
Yeah. I agree. I think watch The Raid 2, and then if you're hungry for more, watch Merantau. If you're a little bit curious, maybe watch Safe Haven, but don't watch any of the rest of VHS 2. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool, man. Well, I think we're both big fans of this guy, and we both look forward to seeing what he does in the future. I myself, I'm really looking forward to Headshot when it comes out. I think he produced that.
Correct.
Yeah, so, you know, we can wait and see. Hopefully it gets a release here. So what's up next for you, man? You busy over Christmas?
Yeah, in terms of family stuff, we have our big Christmas dinner, and then we go to a really, like, probably the best restaurant in the area. It's like a really, really great place, so I'm looking forward to that. And then, New Year's Eve, I got my bottle of champagne back here, ready to go. And then for my channel, I'm just going to be hammering out a bunch of DVD collection videos and trying to get some reviews in along the way.
Cool. Any plans for next year with your channel?
I'm going to try to break out more of a variety since I covered so much Asian horror this year. So I am going to try to get that Takashi Miike filmography review in next year.
Awesome.
And then I'll be gone for a few weeks because I'm going to Japan for vacation again. But other than that, I'll be churning stuff out, I think.
What do you plan on doing in Japan? Just sightseeing, or?
I'm doing. I like Kyoto a lot, so I'm gonna do Kyoto for like 10 days and then Osaka for 4.
Nice. I'm totally jealous of you, man.
It takes a while to save up for that one.
Yeah. Tell me about it. I just got back from Taiwan. It's like my second time in Taiwan this year, but it's actually was really cheap to go there, and I needed a holiday just to get away. But yeah, I really need to go back to Japan at some stage. That's my New Year's resolution, is to go back to Japan next year. Maybe South Korea. I've never been to South Korea, believe it or not.
Yeah, me neither.
I know. I really need to go. Everybody, I'm sure a lot of people will be shocked to hear that, but I've never been there, even though I focus on South Korean cinema.
Mm-hmm.
But, actually, I've got some news. Did you see I did a Where's My Age of Shadows review thing? Did you watch that video?
Yep.
There is a theatre playing it in Brisbane at the moment. I just discovered that today on my own. Nobody told me. There's a theatre at the local university. It's called the Chanel Theatre, and they're playing Age of Shadows. It just started playing the other day, so I'm going to see it tomorrow.
Nice.
And it's only going to cost me $8, which is really cheap in Australia because the cinema usually costs about $18.
Jeez.
So I don't know. I've never been to that cinema before. I'm guessing it's because it's at a university. I'm sure it's probably really tiny, but I don't care. I really want to see that movie. And it's
I do too.
It's the only way I can see it. Only way. So it's a shame that film got pulled from cinemas. It really is. But I spoke with the distributor, and they were really sad about it as well because nobody was going to see it, which is really surprising. Really surprising. So, yeah, I'm planning on doing a top 10 video before the year ends. Probably top 10 South Korean films. I was even thinking about throwing together like my worst films of the year, because I've seen a lot of bad movies this year. Mainly Chinese films.
Oh, no.
Unfortunately.
You'll get some comments for that.
Oh, I get comments all the time. I get some of the. Do you get any hate? I can't remember if we said this.
I don't think I've made it. I don't think I've made it yet on YouTube because I haven't had someone, just tell me to kill myself or something like that yet.
Somebody go to Eric's channel and tell him to kill himself. But don't kill yourself, mate. We still love you. Don't do it.
No.
Cool, man. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for being on the show. As always, I'll put the links to Eric's channel at the bottom of this video. Check out his stuff. It's fantastic. Thanks for being on, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you again for inviting me.
No worries. We'll do this again sometime soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Peace.
Later.